but business must just keep their nose out of it. The last thing I want to mention is that the rand means a lot to you and me. But if you have no money, if you have no bread every day, the rand is the last thing on your mind. And although it should be the first thing, but it's the last thing. I'm talking reality. So most people that voted for these people doesn't have the concern that me and you have about what would this do to the rent. The rent has also been...
So, in this very interesting discussion between Gayton McKenzie and Alec from Biznews, Gayton McKenzie is actually sending a really strong warning, another strong warning to the business community to try to listen to the voice of the people and not the voice of the rand. We know that business is actually more about, raising capital, generating capital, increasing value. But Gayton McKenzie is trying to caution the business community in South Africa to slowly start learning to listen to the voice of the people and the choices of the people, as unfortunate as that voice might be sometimes, because I know that Rob herself has actually spoken about how unfortunate it is that the voice of the people has actually tended to be supportive of a leftist direction for South Africa in the way the votes have actually turned out to be. But Gayton McKenzie is actually admonishing the business community to slowly start learning to listen to the voice of the people of South Africa rather than the voice of the rand, so that there can be a balance in its pursuit of capital, but at the same time in the balance in the political landscapes in South Africa. Let's listen to what Gayton McKenzie has to speak about how the voice of the people of South Africa might be much more important for the investors rather than the rand. And I'll be back for some really interesting analysis.
Let me tell you something. There's this obsession with Putin to put him in this election. I can tell you that Putin had really nothing to do with funding MK. If Putin has funded MK, MK would have won 100% of the vote. I can tell you firstly that. Secondly, when I came to a more serious point, you see, that's the problem. You put the rent before the people of South Africa. That's the first problem. You see, the rent of South Africa is well known to be a political player. You talk about what the rent will do if EFF comes into power. I don't like EFF, but the fact remains, EFF's got 39 seats, if I'm not mistaken. They got 39 seats, so they got representation that should be respected. I should respect. The rent should respect. So are we saying that we vote to keep the rent happy? That's number one. Number two, let me tell you something about the rent. When you look at the possibility of what might go wrong, it will be Armageddon. The rent will do nothing to stop that. I'm saying the rent should find its niche. Business should just find a niche in thing. The rent survived apartheid. The rent survived the National Party. How can he not survive EFF? People, I'm saying to you, Alec, and I want to say it here on your show. The only reason why there's nothing happening in this country at this moment regarding violence is because Jacob Zuma said, be disciplined. When are you guys, and I'm including you in that, when are you guys going to understand that Jacob Zuma is the most well-loved man in this country? I told you at your conference. That's what I like about you. Let me speak these things at your conference. I told you Zuma is the most well-loved man, more than Mandela. People love Zuma more than Mandela. And guys, I know why people say there, and they think, how did he make it? How stupid can people be to vote for him? When Zuma walked in there by the IEC, by the Rock Center, they see even Helen Zerkfell was everybody was excited. There was there was an atmosphere there. Let me tell you, and people love him. And I just think that if business should rather force for we must revote. But this time was strange because then we lay all of this to bed. But we cannot come and say EFF should be. That's not democracy. If you want to keep EFF out for the mere fact that you don't like them, I don't like them. But I can't, and neither can the rent say, we'll go down, whatever. As long as there's minerals in this country, we're sitting at the three in the world. Russia, DRC, South Africa has got the majority of the minerals in South Africa, in the world. So South Africa forms part of the top three. Let me tell you something. As an investor, the rand
I
will
hear your
get always
story.
10.
I hear your story, but if you consider Venezuela has got a big percentage of the world's oil reserves, and the man who runs it is the EFF's idol, I think there are two sides to every story. But I just wanted to ask you something about the vote in KZN. I pulled out some numbers. MK got 1.6 million votes. That's what the IEC tells us. Out of 3.5 million votes that were cast in the province. But there are 5.75 million registered voters. So the actual vote tally was less than a quarter of the total people who could have voted, and 28% of those who should have voted. In other words, there's 28% of people are making a decision, and your friend Rob Hersov is saying they must leave South Africa. Surely another approach for KZN might be, if Mr. Zuma wants to run it as is in the way that he wants to run it, and it's, as you say, everyone's democratic right and the voters' democratic right, then surely the right way would be to have a referendum, perhaps, where everybody in the province can then vote and say, okay, we think that this is the way ahead or not. I'm just trying to explore as a devil's advocate here on where KZN goes forward, because it's a dilemma, my goodness.
No, but it's not a Zuma problem, what you just said. It's a South African problem. There's more people that that eligible to vote, that doesn't vote. So why are we making it a Zuma problem, while you can say the same about the DA in Western Cape, saying that why should Zuma have a referendum and Helen Zeller has never a referendum? Zuma also doesn't want to be what you guys want to make him to be, the Induna of KZN. Why should he be the Induna of KZN? And what Zuma is saying, that he wants to run the country, South Africa. I am just saying, Alec, the obsession was wanting to see Zuma hang by the tree is what put us here. Here's the problems for your listeners. I met with the ANC, the PA met with the ANC top leadership. There are 5 of the national executive members there and 4 of the NEC members in the meeting. And we will meet again tomorrow. They said before Friday, so I assume it's tomorrow. Here's the issue that you are having. By pushing for Zuma, by pushing this DA-ANC marriage, do you know that 30% of the ANC members will move to Zuma? He will then start taking all the municipalities one by one. There will be by-elections. Even the opportunists that is not even liking Zuma, they will also go. And you will have bigger problems in 2 years, or in 2026. Now, South Africa loves to kick the can down the road. We should have long dealt with the land issues. We should have long dealt with other issues. But we love it to kick the can down the road. Now you are taking our problem to 2026, a problem that we can sort out now. That, for me, is let's deal with this issue now. There will be no DA left if they go with the ANC. I told you last time, if you have 1,000 liters of ice cream and you have 1 spoon of shit, and you mix those two, you no longer have ice cream, you have shit. So I just think that democracy is not nice at times. So let democracy prevail. And but business must just keep their nose out of it. The last thing I want to mention is that the rand means a lot to you and me. But if you have no money, if you have no bread every day, the rand is the last thing on your mind. And although it should be the first thing, but it's the last thing. I'm talking reality. So most people that voted for these people doesn't have the concern that me and you have about what will this do to the rand. The rand has also been proven in the past to be able to be manipulated by our own banks, and they've pleaded guilty to that. So I don't think we should be held hostage by the rand. And it's not only Venezuela. You had a place like Greece that also blew up financially once. And everybody makes the example of Venezuela. Greece had the best policies and it imploded financially, and they had to be bailed out. So countries go, even Argentina at the time, countries go through recession, inflation, but we always hear about Venezuela, although it's not the only country in the world. I'm a capitalist, and I'm saying to you, there's capitalist countries that also go to problems. I will also always hear about the socialist leaning countries that's going to problems.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant, really brilliant. So, what do you guys think? I think it's really sometimes, the electorate. I remember Professor P.L.O. Lumumba usually speaks about a term in Latin where he speaks about vox populi, vox Dei. So, in other words, that the voice of the people is the voice of God. And he really speaks about how, especially democracy, as the popular mantra we learned growing up, democracy is actually government of, for, and by the people, and that the people are the most important, even though business, foreign direct investment in this regard is actually important in growing the nation state, that entity in which encapsulates the overall well-being and the societal direction and what society cultures represent within that space. The nation state itself depends, and would not like depends completely, but it would do well if it allows room for foreign direct investment to expand the people's pursuit of their own well-being through the pursuit of jobs and feeling of value creation that kind of like makes people feel alive. You see, so foreign direct investment is key. But Gayton McKenzie here in this video is actually arguing that there's a tendency by business to really continuously and blindly pursue foreign direct investment and the growth of capital and all that without listening to the voice and the cries of the people. And that the elections in 2024 in South Africa have actually shown that the voice of the people can actually be louder than the voice of the rand. And so that we should also learn, especially as business people, to try to understand the voice of the people and what the voice of the people are actually speaking about, and probably have business work within the mandates of the voice of the people. So it's really interesting, a really interesting perspective and worldview to really understand how to interpret the South Africa's elections that have just passed. But anyway, for this video, I thought to really analyze how, especially in terms of the voice of the people, what the electorate in South Africa actually voted for, and interpret the political climate at the moment in that light. And I found a really interesting article on New York Times. New York Times, it actually speaks about South Africa's election results and what their results speak to and speak about as South Africa's history continuously evolves over time. So it speaks about how the African National Congress, ANC, actually lost its political monopoly in South Africa after elections that resulted on Saturday showed that almost all the votes counted. The party had received only 40%, falling short of the winning absolute majority for the first time since vanquishing Africa's last white-led regime 30 years ago. So it speaks about how that with South Africans facing one of the world's highest unemployment rates, and that rate I think I shared yesterday was 33%. That 3% is a really high percentage for a country to have an unemployment rate. So you can imagine how many people walk around Africa every day hoping, wishing and really not having a clear idea of how the next meal would come. 33% of that population of 60 million are unemployed, and I think that's really scary. It also speaks about how South Africa faces one of the world's highest unemployment rates, shortages of electricity and water, and rampant crime. It says that the governing party, the ANC, still bested its competitors, but fell short of the nearly 58% of the vote it won in the last election in 2019. So it speaks about that the performance of the ANC is actually a staggering nosedive, and actually it puts one of the continent's most stable countries, that's South Africa, and its largest economy onto an uneasy and uncharted course. Now, it says that the ANC, which rose to international acclaim on the shoulders of Nelson Mandela, will now have 2 weeks to cobble together a government by partnering with one or more of its rivals that may have derided it as corrupt and vowed never to form an alliance with that. And we know that this was the basis of the formation of the Moonshot Pact of the multi-party charter, where these 6 parties or 8 parties came together. It was more like an anti-ANC pact, so to speak. So they decided to come together to gather votes that they could get from their multiple parties and use that to gain a majority of 50% plus 1 to be able to unseat outrightly the ANC. But that failed, as we've noticed. And then Action SA and even the United Independent Movement, UIM, led by Neil De Beer and Herman Mashaba, have actually argued that they are dumping the Moonshot Pact for its betrayal of the cause. It also speaks about how that Cyril Ramaphosa, who leads the ANC, faces a grave threat to his ambition of serving in second term. He will be forced to summon the negotiating skills that famously helped him broker the end of apartheid and pull together his highly factionalized party, which is likely to disagree on which party to ally with. So we know that, I think I made a video there, one of the videos where I spoke about how the government of national unity formed, and Ramaphosa was actually been around for that negotiation, and that I think he has a really masterful skills in negotiating, and that I think South Africa will be hoping to see that come to play in this negotiations for the government of national unity. The research here speaks about how detractors are expected to lay blame for this devastating tumble of the ANC at Ramaphosa's feet, and that they could try to replace him, possibly with his deputy Paul Mashatile. But previously, the party's biggest drop from one election to the next was the 4.7% in 2019. But this has been its own biggest drop. It says that, a big factor in the collapse of the ANC was Jacob Zuma, and that this Jacob Zuma is President Ramaphosa's arch-enemy and predecessor as president of the ANC. So it says that just 6 months ago, Mr. Zuma helped launch a new party, Umkhonto Wesizwe, which was the name of the ANC's armed wing during the struggle against apartheid. The MK party, won almost 15%, you see, really suddenly, of the vote, an unprecedented result for a new party in an election. It siphoned crucial votes from the ANC and also the EFF also, and Action SA actually have claimed that the MK also siphoned a lot of its votes as a new entrant to the political space. Now it says that despite the astonishing outcome, Mr. Zuma, a scandal-plagued populist who thrives on grievance politics, discredited the election, saying that his party had actually received 2/3 of the vote, but the elections were rigged. And Jacob Zuma is actually going to court now to provide evidence for that and really fight for a repolling of South Africa's elections. It says that party officials, anyway, they say that they have presented evidence to the Electoral Commission, but Mr. Zuma, who heads the party, despite being barred from joining parliament, did not make evidence public. The evidence of the rigging isn't yet public, and I don't know why. Probably Jacob Zuma, we know he's a master tactician. He might want to bring out that evidence at a very terrible, crucial time that would maybe disrupt the whole parliamentary sitting that's been planned to take place in a few days. But Zuma warned the commission not to certify the election results as has been scheduled. Anyway, it says that representatives from about 24 other small parties also claim irregularities in the election, joined Mr. Zuma in his call to postpone the announcement of official results. So it says that Mr. Zuma's action foreshadowed the political challenges he could cause the ANC, and that without an absolute majority, the ANC can no longer handpick the country's president, who is elected by the 400-member National Assembly. There were 52 parties in the national election, and the number of seats that parties receive in the assembly is based on the percentage of votes they won. South Africa is going to go through teething problems as it enters this era, says a data analyst. Some of them might be significant, but voters decided they want this. Because of the big gap to reach 50%, the ANC would likely try to ally with some of the bigger parties it traded bitter barbs with during the campaign. And we know that the DA is actually one of those, the EFF actually also, and the Freedom Front Plus. Now, it says that this predicament upends South Africa's political landscape and places the ANC at an inflection point. Its potential coalition partners run the ideological gamut, and that the party could alienate different parts of its base. depending on whom it chooses as a partner. Now, a big question is whether the ANC will embrace or shun Mr. Zuma, who resigned as president in 2018 because of corruption allegations. The ANC leaders may resist one of Mr. Zuma's fundamental demands for a coalition government, and the daughter of Jacob Zuma, Duduzile Zuma, said that her father's party would not partner with the ANC of Ramaphosa. So this is a non-negotiable for the MK party. That as long as the ANC is still led by President Ramaphosa, the AMK party would not be willing to join anything of a unity government or a government of national unity proposed by the ANC. Now, it speaks about how another potential ally for the ANC is the DA, the Democratic Alliance, which drew the second largest share of the vote, nearly 22%. And some ANC members have accused the Democratic Alliance of promoting policies that would essentially take the country back to apartheid. Others view with a partnership between the ANC and the DA as a natural fit because the Democratic Alliance market-based view of the economy align closely with President Ramaphosa. But entering this grand coalition could prove politically risky for Mr. Ramaphosa because the DA has been staunchly against race-based policies intended to increase black employment and wealth. So we've seen, I've featured in this channel a lot of DA parties like DA members like Chris Pappas and even John Steen, who is in, speaking about how that the DA would scrap BEE, so Black Economic Empowerment, which was a program designed to restitute in a way or absorb some of the historical injustice apprehended upon black people during the apartheid era. So this is kind of like going to be like a challenge for Mr. Ramaphosa. And it's also said that the DA has also pushed issues that appeal to the right-wing white population of South Africa. Now, it says that the ANC could instead look to the Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF, a party that was started a decade ago by one of the ANC's expelled youth leaders. We know that Julius Malema, and that Julius Malema's party, the EFF, fell short of the expectations, winning less than 10% of the vote after getting nearly 11% in 2019. Now, it speaks about how that Mr. Malema spoke about. It speaks about how Mr. Malema now said that the EFF wants to work with the ANC. It says that Mr. Malema said during the news conference on Saturday that we want to work with the ANC, adding that the governing party would be easier to stomach because of its severe electoral slide. The ANC, when compromised, is not arrogant, says Malema. Now, analysts said that such a partnership, especially this is now a partnership between the ANC and the EFF, could spook big business and international investors because of the Economic Freedom Fighters' insistence of nationalizing the mines and other businesses and taking land from white owners to redistribute to black owners, what has popularly been known as land expropriation without compensation. Now, it says that a large segment of the ANC is ideologically aligned with the EFF's philosophy on wealth redistribution, okay? And that there's a fear that the country is headed towards a political chaos that would shift focus away from its many problems. Coalition governments on the local level have proved unstable, with leaders changing on a whim and infighting so bitter that lawmakers fail to get anything done for their constituency. But for many South Africans anyway, enduring hardship made them question whether they truly had been liberated from apartheid. This unprecedented moment represented a chance for a reset on par with the transition to democracy a generation ago. So during the election, he said that the slogan, 2024 is our 1994, circulated on social media and campaign posters, especially among young South Africans. Now, the watershed election ended the dominance of the ANC party, which was a party that spearheaded the fight against colonialism and reshaped Africa in the second half of the 20th century. Stories of the torture and hardship ANC members endured helped turn many of them into heroes in the eyes of South Africa and the world, a reputation that kept many voters who grew up under apartheid undyingly loyal to the ANC. But that loyalty waned as many South Africans failed to see their material conditions improve significantly under decades of ANC rule, while many of the party's leaders amassed huge wealth. So we know that younger South Africans who did not live under white rule have become a growing part of the electorate, and they tend to be less interested in the party's aura than its performance in government. And that the results of the elections for provincial legislatures provided the most startling picture of the ANC's decline. It fell by nearly 40 percentage points in Zuma's home province in KwaZulu-Natal, 20 points in Mpumalanga, and one of his strongholds, and also 15 points in Gauteng, the most populous province that includes Johannesburg. Some of the country's neighbors in South Africa are governed by former liberation movements that are close allies to the ANC and also have been seen declining electoral support. The result of South Africa's election could portend the downfall of the ANC. So this is actually one reason, one way to understand Gayton McKenzie's argument to slowly start listening to the voice of the electorate. And the electorate really is changing because the majority which the ANC has enjoyed since 1994 seem to have been stemmed from many people who fought and lived under apartheid and whose immediate generation, post that the immediate generations after them had an understanding of a picture of what the ANC suffered under apartheid or what black South Africans suffered under apartheid. But now that the new generation, especially the youth, actually have been cropping, the newer generations, they've started understanding and probably questioning why their immediate lives haven't been improving. Most of the promises that the ANC made for black South Africa hasn't been coming true. And a lot of the young South Africans have really been questioning what the whole fight, the liberation fight was for. And this was a really major significant effect in the ANC's drop and slowly hunger for a much more divergent arrangement in parliament, a much more divergent voice in policy design for South Africa, which probably could improve the life of the general people of South Africa. So this is one reason, this is one perspective to understand Gayton McKenzie's argument and warning to the business community to slowly start listening to the voice of South Africa and not the voice of the Rand. And probably the Rand, could actually, the business community could actually impact more positive effects on South Africa, understanding the voice of the people and where the voice of the people really want to go, rather than being scared that the direction of the country is moving more leftist towards becoming a like of a Zimbabwe or of Venezuela. This is a major fear for the business community in South Africa. But I don't know, this has been a lot of information. What do you guys think about this thoughts with speech by Gayton McKenzie? Share your thoughts in the comments.